Thank you, Joy. Good morning. It's interesting. I looked for quite a long time trying to find a responsive reading which discussed the 7 principles in a more interesting way, but really was unable to find one, which is strange indeed. I'm not entirely sure why that is. Something which is, I think, a deficit within Unitarianism. But as Joyce said, I'm speaking to you for the second time on my thoughts on Stoicism. Previously, I'd given a relatively simple introduction to some of the components, and with the limitation of the 15 to 20 minutes that I have here, you can only do so much in such a short time. Today, I will continue my discussion of Stoic ideas, and I will focus on the degree to which Stoicism is consistent with our Unitarian principles. Again, the time is short, so I only have enough time to introduce ideas. As our responsive reading, we simply read the principles aloud, and many of you are familiar with them, some who are perhaps less, who have not been in Unitarianism quite so long, perhaps may not be as familiar with them. So it's good to go over them and remind ourselves of what they say. These form an ethical structure of an abbreviated sort. What is an ethical structure? It is principles, ideas, standards by which we relate to others and continue our own spiritual journey. But what does it mean in the first principle to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person? This is relatively vague and somewhat general. Perhaps something more specific would be helpful. What does affirm mean? What does promote mean? What is inherent worth and dignity? To put this principle into action, it is necessary to flesh these out a bit and become a bit more clear on what they actually mean. In some ways, Stoic thinking and Stoic ideas can help us flesh out some of these principles. Rather than simply going through the numbers and saying, number 1, number 2, number 3, blah, 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 I've tried to concentrate on some of them. I've picked what I consider the most important 4, and then I try to sketch a manner in which Stoic ideas can elucidate and illuminate these principles and perhaps provide substance for them. Some of the principles are more important than others. So let's begin with a combination of principles 1 and 2. They do go together to a certain degree. There's a bit of commonality in them, and so I will remind you of them. Principle 1, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and number 2, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. In the UU website, there is a brief discussion of the 7 principles, a couple of paragraphs, and I've edited these just a little bit. What they say in the UU website is, Principle 1, reverence and respect for human nature is at the core of Unitarian Universalism and the faith. We believe that all dimensions of our being carry the potential to do good. Let's remember that word, good. Unitarian Universalists affirm the inherent worth and dignity of each person as a given of faith, an unshakable conviction calling us to self-respect and respect for others. Now 2, justice and equity and compassion in human relations points us toward something beyond inherent worth and dignity. It points us to the larger community. It gets at collective responsibility. Justice, equity, and compassion are part of the same package. So those are the principles and a little bit of elucidation on them. These principles are closely related, and their interpretation in Stoic ideas springs from the same Stoic virtues. So we relate to others, the manner in which we relate to others in a positive, good, and healthy way falls under the rubric of the term ethics. Ethics is a key component of Stoic philosophy. The Stoic virtues, which are temperance, justice, wisdom, and courage, they really fall into two groups. Temperance, which is self-control and moderation in your own behavior, and courage, which is the willingness to go beyond your fears to do things that need to be done. These are virtues which a person should manifest in their activities and which are personal characteristics. They govern how you should behave. Justice and wisdom, the other two virtues, really involve the manner in which the Stoic treats other persons. The Stoic scholar Donald Robertson put it this way. In Stoicism, there is a broad concept which is social virtue. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome in roughly 187 BC, the philosopher king, so to speak, constantly reminds himself that his actions should be dedicated to the fundamental goal of life, the attainment of wisdom and virtue. However, the virtue of justice must also aim at an external outcome, and for Stoics, that is the common welfare of mankind. Everything a Stoic does should contribute in some small way to benefiting humanity, or at least not do the opposite. We might describe this as Stoic philanthropy or brotherly love. Sometimes people conceptualize this as starting with the family. You have a natural feeling of love and affection and want to support your child, your spouse, your partner, and then this moves out to larger groups. Sometimes it includes your second cousins, but that's not always the case. But you move it out from your family to the larger family, to your friends, to your community, and this forms a non-theistic ethical framework. You wish to treat others as you wish them to treat you. Perhaps you've heard that statement before. So the Stoic virtue of justice can be broken down a bit more to two terms. It can be broken down to the term of kindness, which is simply the opposite of anger. According to Stoics, anger is the desire to hurt others because of some perceived injury, desire for vengeance. Kindness, by contrast, is the desire to help people, to find a way to promote their interests, to treat them in a way which helps them. Fairness is an approach to being even-handed. We wish to treat other people in an even-handed manner, not necessarily an equality of outcome. It's not possible to guarantee the same results will occur, but it is equality of opportunity. We wish to give everyone the same opportunities. That is a good way of looking at justice. Now, one thing that did come up in our last discussion was the Stoic notion of what is the good. And I asked you to remember that earlier. This is an interesting point. In my reading on Stoicism, I have sought for a week or two to find a discussion of what the good is. And this is difficult in Stoicism to find the good. There is a certain um, it's almost a Stoic koan or a Stoic Zen thing that you know the good when you see it, which is pretty unsatisfying. It's a fairly serious problem, because if we can't really define the good, if we can't define the good in a common way, which we can either agree with or disagree with, then we end up with a situation where things may degenerate into moral relativism, where the good for me is what I'm interested in, and to hell with you. So we don't, having the good, which is self-centered and centered in the individual, is certainly a difficult situation. We really don't want to do that. You can even justify evil actions by, it's good for me, and to hell with everybody else. And so we do have to keep that in mind. This is an issue with Stoicism, and really it's been discussed fairly in a number of things I've read recently. I think in the way that I'm interpreting it, since Stoicism was developed and conceived of by Greek and Roman, essentially upper-class men who didn't have to work very much, as far as I can tell, the idea of normal behavior, which they had institutionalized and basically pounded into them from their birth, may have a lot to do with the Stoic ideas of good, that you don't have to define it if everybody knows what it is, at least everybody who's in the in-group. And so the idea of good in Stoic thinking is tied in many ways to the ideals of civic virtue in these Greek and Roman societies, which, oddly enough, amazingly enough, stunningly enough, the civic virtue ideals are temperance, justice, wisdom, and courage, which I just defined as the Stoic virtues. So I think that this is tied a bit to the societal ideals. So that's something to bear in mind. So let's go on. Principle 4 is the next one I want to discuss. Principle 4 is a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And from the UU discussion of this, as responsible religious seekers, we recognize that we are privileged to be free, to have resources to pursue life beyond mere survival, to continually search for truth and meaning, to exist beyond bonds of dogma and oppression, and to wrestle freely with truth and meaning as they evolve. This principle calls us not to be isolated and self-centered, believing our perspective trumps all others, but to search responsibly. So, a little bit of elucidation of how the Unitarians think about that. Stoic teachings lead us to one important idea. For the Stoic, learning is a lifelong and continual process. Stoicism is a, quote, regimen for training the mind, as Stoic author Donald Robertson puts it. Stoic approaches to problems are not ones that come automatically to you. They require that you work and continually try to improve your own use of these. But the free and responsible search for wisdom is a part of Stoicism, and it ties into this fourth principle. One such approach that Stoics discuss and promote is the notion of a, quote, daily check-in. Seneca said, I hope no one takes this the wrong way, when the light had been removed and my wife, long aware of my habit, had become silent, I scan the whole of my day and retrace all of my deeds and words. So this was his idea of a Stoic check-in. The check-in is a mental exercise to see what was done well and done poorly. It's a meditation of sorts, but one directed at specific issues. Are you attaining your goals? Are your actions consonant with your values? Then, in the morning, you may plan again for the day, for the next day, and again, at the end of that day, you review. So, the notion here is that you continually try to improve yourself by paying attention to what you actually are saying and doing. Are they consistent with what you wish to do? One of the key attributes of many Stoics is that they continue to learn in adulthood. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor of the 2nd century, had tutors throughout his life. He was the emperor, but he had men, and again, this was the 2nd century, 1800 years before women were given, were encouraged to be more free and have agency. He had men who were his tutors. His brother Lucius, who was his mirror opposite, Lucius and Marcus were both adopted, and they were not related. They were adopted by their father, and they became the emperor through adoption rather than through biology. Lucius, who was the mirror opposite of Marcus Aurelius, stopped his intellectual development when he became an adult. He degenerated into a hedonist. He drank a lot. He had a lot of women, did nothing but enjoy himself, spent huge amounts of money on his friends, but he did not continue to learn. His life was it was not one that was productive, and he did not extol the Stoic virtues. Marcus Aurelius was far more of an exponent and far more of an example. Now, in Stoicism, the term philosophy is not as we believe it, as we understand it today. A philosophy was not an abstract thing where people sit around and talk about what is truth, the nature of reality, how do we find God, and perhaps some of the topics of philosophy today. In Stoicism, the philosophical intent was practical application of ideas to your behavior and life. It involved training your mind with certain problems that we are all beset with. And what are these problems? Well, we are all beset with anger. We all become angry. Why do we become angry? Well, something happens that is unexpected or bad. Our car is hit by another car. We hit another car with our car. Something bad happens at work. What should be done with our anger? Well, Stoics really had some very careful thoughts about anger. Everyone gets angry. Anger, in the Stoic way of looking at it, was a temporary insanity. That moment when you really do see red, your vision is constricted, your voice changes, you become very tense. This is a temporary insanity. You are led to do things that you probably may regret if you are not careful. So for the Stoic, there are several steps that they took. First, that anger is something that happens with people. People become angry. Everyone does. Perhaps some people here have not become angry, but I certainly have. The second step is to take the time to remain calm and do or say nothing as is possible. Third, you try to make decisions and plans when the temporary insanity of the anger is past. What did you do to create the situation? Sometimes you did nothing. Sometimes it's something that happened to you. Your car was hit. You were driving correctly. somebody does something at work and you get blamed. You did nothing. Other times, you have created the situation and have added to it. Maybe it's something where you made a mistake, where you in fact are to blame. It's important to take stock. Am I part of the problem? What do I need to do to solve the problem? What can be done to solve the problem? Getting angry is our response to something, but then making choices and decisions under that anger state is not a good thing. It's not the anger itself, but what you do in response to the anger that makes the difference and can turn a negative thing into a positive one. Of course, it's very easy for me to say that standing up here in front of you, and you're all sitting out there probably dozing off. It's easy for me to say this, and how actually do we put this into effect? How do we control our anger? Well, like anything else, controlling your behavior, controlling your anger requires you to train yourself. How is this to be done? Really, again, there's no secret. As Epictetus, a very important Stoic of roughly the 2nd century of Rome again, as a first step, keep quiet and count the days you do not become angry. If you can quit for 30 days, make a sacrifice to God. Every habit is loosened at first and then totally destroyed. So, to become controlled, and you can follow certain steps, and these are outlined in much of the Stoic writing. I've only scratched the surface of what is suggested. Another Stoic notion regarding learning and improvement is advice given to Zeno of Citium, who is the man who lived roughly 350 BC, before Christ, 350 years before Christ, close to the time of the Golden Age of Athens. He founded Stoicism. He was given a prophecy from the Oracle of Delphi. And the Oracle said, to live the best life, you should have conversations with the dead. To live the best life, you should have conversations with the dead. Odd thing indeed. Perhaps the first zombie movie plot. But no, that's not as complicated as that. Zeno finally came to the realization that what the oracle meant was that taking advice from dead people by reading their books, by understanding their life, by contemplating what they did and said, is how to have a conversation with them. And in fact, one Stoic practice is to pick a person who you admire, who you believe to be someone who has a admirable life and approach to things, and ask yourself, would that person approve of what I did? What would that person do? So you can have a conversation with that dead person by consulting them in your own mind. So let's talk now about Principle 7. Respect for the interdependent web of existence of which we are all part. The UU words say, this is a glorious statement. It is our solution to the seeming conflict between the individual and the group. It may be the Unitarian Universalist way of coming to fully embrace something greater than ourselves. The interdependent web, expressed as the spirit of life, the ground of all being, the oneness of all existence, etc., can help us to develop the social understanding of ourselves that we need. So, Stoic thoughts. In terms of the web of existence, Stoic teachers were very interested in Stoic meditation. We've talked, I mentioned last time that there's relations between Stoicism and Buddhism, and there is the meditation aspect is certainly shared between them. Stoicism does not emphasize it as much, but expanding the mind is an important part of Stoic physics, according to Donald Robertson, who is, again, a current Stoic writer, one that I have gotten a lot from. For the Stoic, the notion of nature or fate or Zeus or the divine or the universe or whatever, it's an important one, but not a deity to be worshipped, but more in the sense of the universe of which we are all a part. For Marcus Aurelius, contemplating the universe of which we are all individual limbs becomes an important psychological exercise. So in many cases, people are advised to calm themselves by staring at the ocean or looking at the universe or looking at the stars. This gives you a feeling for the place that you hold in the existence, and that there is part of nature and the universe which will, you are part of it, but it will persist beyond you. One of the most important aspects of this contemplation of nature is the impermanence of our physical persons. Stoics are fond of a quotation from Marcus Aurelius: "You can die any day." That's what led me to the story this morning. Seneca, who was a counselor to Nero, this was roughly 69 AD. Nero was the fifth of the Augustinian line of emperors. He said, "Let us prepare our minds as if we come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing. Let us balance life's books every day. The one who puts the finishing touches on their life each day is never short of time." This has been the topic of many sermons by a minister of a former church, who suggested that a visit to the graveyard and a contemplation of those there in the graveyard gives us a clearer perspective on our life in the present moment. We can die every day, so we must act now to do the things we must accomplish. Interestingly, according to some accounts, when Nero uncovered a plot of which Seneca was a part, or Nero believed he was a part, he sent a note to Seneca saying, "You have counseled me that you can die every day. Well, today is that day, so you are to die." And Seneca was then committed suicide. I sure hope I don't have any Neros governing my behavior. Many religions and philosophies do take this point of view that, paying attention to your mortality is very important. We should take away the illusion that we live forever and that we will forever have our powers and skills. My own family, my father had little strokes, and they diminished his intellectual capability. This may happen to me. My mother's hearing is considerably diminished, and this may again happen to me. I'm the son of two people who had bad hearing as they aged. I may have bad hearing too. Our powers and skills will diminish. We will become less capable. The Stoic notion of "you can die any day" focuses our attention on the moment, on the here and now. There is a phrase, "memento mori," which means remember you are mortal. When a Roman general was given a triumph in Rome, which was a big parade to celebrate the destruction and death of hundreds of thousands of people who were not Romans, all of Rome would show up for this parade. They were always happy to get money from these subject people. And so this triumph involved usually the king of these people being paraded around in chains, and the general who engineered the whole deal would be in a chariot, and there was always a slave who stood behind him, and the slave would whisper into his ear, "Remember, you are mortal." Even at the most important time in his life, the remembrance of the shortness and brevity of life put it into perspective. In our own society, who remembers the winner of the Best Actress Oscar from 1972, or the Best Supporting Actress of 1967? These momentary awards and notifications are forgotten. Perhaps somebody out there does remember them, I sure don't. Remember, you are immortal. This was also the theme of the movie Sunset Boulevard, in which aging actress Norma Desmond attempts a comeback, which fails miserably, and she kills people in the meantime. But if you do not accept your mortality, you do not accept the fact that your powers diminish, you will end up being frustrated and possibly look somewhat silly. In Stoicism, there's another phrase called the view from above. This is common in many Stoic ideas. This is an idea that you can take a perspective of far above you to try to put your own problems into perspective. Try to view yourself in an objective and dispassionate manner. Again, this is nothing that is easy to do in many cases. So I will finish at this time. Stoicism can be an approach to flesh out some of our Unitarian principles. It has flaws. Stoicism is not an answer to everything. It is not a philosophical system which is without criticism. This notion of the good is ill-defined within Stoicism, and I think that's important. We may wish to discuss that a bit more in the circle time afterwards. But I thank you for your kind attention.